This is OTB and 10 fantasy banter in 10 minutes or less. And we have to start with what was a wild week one in terms of injury fallout. Garcia from Marlon Mack tearing his Achilles in week one. We had Le'Veon Bell go down. We had Michael Thomas fighting through a high ankle sprain. All across the league, you could look at how injuries are currently plaguing some teams and then consequently fantasy teams going into week two. What stuck out to you the most in week one from an injury perspective?
Without a doubt, it's going to be the Michael Thomas injury. Although he says he's going to play through it, a high ankle sprain for a wideout doesn't give me the confidence that he's going to be at 100%, whether it be for next week or for much of the season. So if I'm a fantasy owner and I selected him in the first round, I'm worried because I don't know what kind of production he's going to be able to produce now with such limitation. So hopefully you've got a fallback to be Emmanuel Sanders or somebody else out there to pick up between now and Wednesday. But this is very concerning because, as you know, as a Giants fan, Saquon kind of had a similar injury. He sat out, 3 weeks?
Yeah.
So if you're a Michael Thomas owner right now, you are in deep, you know what.
Yeah, and here's the issue, and you hit on it with a high ankle sprain. Is he says he's going to play through the injury. We don't have a lot of information here on Tuesday, but what we can imagine is he's not going to be 100%, and how will that impact him? Because we've seen players try to gut through these lower leg injuries, and they have meandering success. Speaking to the Le'Veon Bell one, because people keep asking, like, well, okay, let's go. Is Frank Gore the alternative? I don't know how you watch any moment of New York Jets football, and I know it's only week one, right? So limited sample size, but I don't know how you watched a minute of New York Jets football and said, I want a piece of any of that from a fantasy perspective. Do you agree? I mean, I don't see Frank Gore as a waiver wire target this week because I don't think I want a piece of the Jets, even at full strength.
I'd say Frank Gore more than the Adams kid, but yeah, you don't want any piece of a Jet, no matter what, even if they actually showed some signs of life in opening week against my Buffalo Bills. So, I think if you're desperate and you want to just hold on to Gore, because I see Gore actually being a goal line guy if they ever get down to the goal line, which I'm assuming is going to probably be in a low percentage, the way things looked on Sunday. But, the other ones that you probably want to keep your eye for is kind of the situation pertaining to Indianapolis Colts. Like you said, Mack is gone, but who's it going to be? Jonathan Taylor, or is it going to be Hines? I mean, the jury's still out on that. It seems like Hines might get more of the carries, but your boy Jonathan Taylor showed a lot of promise.
Yeah, what's funny is we all had this expectation that it was going to be somewhat of an egalitarian RBBC in Indianapolis, and as it turned out, at least to start, and it was only week one with a rookie, you don't know how they were going to work him in. It was more so the Marlon Mack and Nyheim Hines show to start. So I agree with you. I think Hines actually has maybe 50-50 value right now because we don't know where Taylor is from a game plan perspective. We don't know how much he's still learning. And so even though his share, obviously, of snaps increased quite a bit once Mack went down, Hines was still what seemingly a critical part of the first part of that game plan, and then certainly was a critical part of the game plan moving forward. So I think that there's still value to have on both sides. Oh, yeah.
It sounds like James Conner, that's still, I don't think there's been any updates on his injury from Monday night. The same with, I guess, Philip Lindsay had turf toe last night as well. So those are two injuries that we need to kind of keep an eye on as we head into waiver wire Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, Benny Snell looked good, and you got to feel for Conner because, it's a contract year for him. And he was really looking to make a move this season to demonstrate, to kind of play with that chip on his shoulder. So it's unfortunate. So week one always brings a fair share of surprises. Garcia, I'm going to go ahead and throw 2 minutes on the clock. What stood out to you? What were you most surprised about in week one?
For a guy who I passed on in the second round, Chris Carson scoring 2 touchdowns, but not by the ground, by the air. So that kind of surprised me, and how Seattle just seemed to kind of leave everything in Russell Wilson's hand. I mean, the stuff I'm reading and hearing is that you get the feel that Seattle's basically putting a campaign together to have Russell Wilson win the MVP this year, the way they were throwing the ball around on Sunday against the Falcons. I think that had more to do with the fact that the Falcons just stunk entirely from top to bottom. and Seattle just wanted to basically expose every which way. But it'll be interesting to see if Carson kind of gets more TDs out of the air than on the ground. So that's going to be something close to watch, because Carlos Hyde, although it was a garbage touchdown, was the one who picked it up on the ground. So that's one that kind of caught me by surprise, the way Seattle kind of took the first opening week there against the Falcons. So it'll be interesting to see how things go out in the next few weeks.
Yeah, so I totally agree with you. I'll split the deck here, because that was actually my biggest surprise too. The first 35 offensive plays, the Seattle Seahawks threw the ball 21 times. And I believe that Russell Wilson threw something like 7 of the first 10 first downs. What is this team? It's not like the Atlanta Falcons are great against the run. It wasn't a game plan decision, at least to what I see. They were middle of the pack in rush defense last year. So what we know, as Kona wants to chime in and think about that too, what we know right now is it looks like Seattle might be not what we thought they were. Maybe they are a retooled pass-first offense. The other thing I would throw out there is, as much as we knew DeAndre Hopkins was going to be part of a game plan, going against a good defense in San Francisco, and all of the attention, I was shocked that DeAndre Hopkins wound up with 14 catches and 100-plus yards. You would think the defense knew he existed after this offseason, wouldn't you?
You would think, and I believe it was a career high for him, which is outstanding, because considering he was the main focal point of that offense, for the Texans for so many years, and he didn't pick up that many receptions. So an odd day between that Niners and Cardinals game. I mean, that one kind of had me scratch my head too, because I think Raheem Mostert scored by the air as well, and that was one of those things where he had more receptions and carries. So it was a strange opening week, but nonetheless, it's good to see kind of life get back to normal, so to speak.
Sure. Now let's move to the disappointments. There always are, and we always like to overreact about them. So 2 minutes back on the clock, and Conan will chime in again to suggest to you, Garcia, what do you think is the biggest disappointment of Week 1? Overreaction Tuesday.
I think if you're a Drew Brees owner, you're worried even more so after hearing the news of Michael Thomas, because that New Orleans Saints, while the Buccaneers defense is good, I don't know if they're that good to kind of really seem like they stymie Brees and the Saints office quite a bit. At least that's how I took it in watching that game. That had a lot of fanfare with Brady making his first appearance as a Buccaneer, and some may look at that as a disappointment for him, but I think you touched on it. It's going to take a while for those guys to gel. Maybe 4 weeks could possibly be when they finally get in their stride. But for Drew Brees and those Saints, the offense, I know Kamara had a score, but to me, it kind of just felt like they were not one bit in sync. And this is a team that many think are going to probably at least make it a run to the title for this year.
Yeah, you're going to laugh at my disappointment, because you just will. It's the state of wide receivers. It's the state of wide receivers, and here's why. So if you look at the top 10 scoring running backs in fantasy in Week 1, 6 of them were drafted within the first 10 running backs in our league. If you look at the top 15, 8 of them were drafted in the first 12. That is compared to only 4 wide receivers of the top 15 that were drafted in the top 15 that ended up finishing top 15. If you look at the top 25, there was only 1 running back that could be found on waivers in our league, a deep league, in the top 25 from Week 1. There were 6 wide receivers that you could find on waivers to go into Week 1 that ended up finishing as a top 25. I don't know how else to say this. In a deep league, there is only one strategy to me, and that is to have running backs of value, because you cannot find them on waivers at any point throughout the season. And as everyone continues to harp on RBBC and how that impacts things, what I think is funny is no one seems to want to talk about the fact that it's increasingly RWBC. It's increasingly 4 or 5 wide receiver sets, get the tight end involved, get the running back involved. There are all these other things that are happening that are diluting targets for these receivers that continue to fly off the boards far too early, from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's as you noted years ago, it's a passing league, and whether that's to a receiver, tight end, or running back. So, I mean, the QBs are throwing the ball with ease, and the protection and the new rules that have been set in stone now. It's definitely a passing league, but, running backs can catch the ball too. So I think, to your point, though, in terms of just kind of the depth of running backs, I mean, there's still some that are worth putting in 5-10% of your waiver budget, but really you're going to want to go through those wide receivers and tight ends for this week, because like you said, I mean, if you're going to be pushing for Peyton Barber, Frank Gore, It's really the only two guys that I kind of see are worth kind of looking at. Otherwise, it's the Ronald Gages, the Hunter Renfros, and those guys on the wide receiver set.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I should say, look, you'll be able to find a running back on waivers in a handcuff situation, right? So injuries will rise these guys up. But otherwise, you're not going to be able to pick a guy off of waivers that is a RB3 in a timeshare and say, oh, this might work out for me. The chances are just so slim. And I should again reference a deep league statement, because in traditional leagues with one flex or with 3 wide receivers, obviously it's not as important to be that deep. But there's really one strategy, in my opinion, in a deep league like this. Okay, we are short on time, to say the least. So we're going to move over to chat a little bit about power ranks. I'm going to put them up on the screen, and I would love to hear your reaction, Garcia. In the first 6 positions, there's only one team that did not win, that ended up ascending not just to a top 6 spot, to a top 3 spot, and that is the Waiverman. And then obviously rounding out picks 7 through 12, we see the majority of teams that unfortunately had a week 1 loss. But if you look at it, every team above 90 points in OTB was the first time ever in league history that was the case. So Garcia, what did you think of the power rankings? I'm sure you've got opinions about this.
I mean, it's no surprise that you position yourself as number 1, and rightfully so. 140 points, thanks to Noah Fent and Judy. But I'm a little surprised that I'm 4th behind Waiverman, who's 0-1 and had one of his top picks not even play, and there's a lot of question marks surrounding Miles Sanders. So, you're just adding bulletin board. I think Regulators probably, in my humble opinion, is the number 1 power ranking team, simply because of the fact that just the dude they have in the running back situation as well as quarterback. I think he also has DeAndre Hopkins on his roster, so he seems to be the team to beat. You've got to be worried. I think Josh Jacobs is an aberration when it comes to the fact that it was against the Carolina Panthers. He scored like 4 touchdowns, so we'll see how he does in week 2. I know he's an RB1 right now overall, but that quarterback situation, I don't think you were really loving what you saw. Although 2 touchdowns, 2 INTs when it was all said and done.
The jury's still out on. I'm still very high on Daniel Jones this year. I think this is going to be a critically challenging early stretch of the season for the Giants, playing some really good defenses, at least we think, good defenses, particularly against the pass, the strong secondaries that he'll have the first month of the season. Still made some mistakes that you don't want to see, but this is a year 2 jump that I still believe in. And I'm still going to ride with. And look, I'm not in control of power ranks as you suggest. I am just an innocent bystander as you. I think that there could be an argument made that you should be much higher, and that Sidebar should be lower. And I also think one of the things that stuck out to me, is we're kind of splitting hairs this year. I mentioned we're the first time ever in league history that every team was above 90 points. When you really start trying to figure out, and a lot of this is going to be also predicting the future in terms of, bench players that will pop or injury issues or sustainability of certain scores from week 1. Look, it's a crapshoot at this point. So at this point, we're throwing darts, and it's tough to rank anyone beyond just a shadow of a doubt of maybe some projected outputs in the future. So yeah, I think there's plenty to be argued there, and I'm sure plenty of people will.
I think this is the first time in the last 3 years that your quarterback didn't put up like 50 points in opening week. So not sure what that means. Maybe now it's going to be your running back fines that you come up with moving forward.
We are out of time. OTB in 10. We will be back in week 3, at the end of week 2, so to speak, to look ahead to week 3. So best of luck on the waiver wire, and we will see you next week.